Hi, everyone, and welcome. This is Karen Newman. This is the Saturday Human Colony Hucolo webinar. It is Saturday, the 18th of July, 2020. And today we have a little bit of a different program. Today we're going to interview Max Rempel, who is a Ph.D., DNA. Tell me exactly your title. You are in microbiology, is that correct?
We call it molecular biology. In common language, it's called microbiology. But for us, microbiologists are the ones who study microbes, and molecular are the ones who study DNA and proteins.
So you're molecular biologist.
Molecular PhD in a master's in chemistry and PhD in molecular biology.
Okay, so he's a doctor of molecular biology, and he's also the founder of Human Colony. So we like to have you on more often, but you're very busy, so we just wanted to welcome you. And today we're going to do something a little different. We're going to do an interview with you to talk about what you're doing, your work, how it's going to impacting, because you have the scientific part and then you have the spiritual part, and I know your goal is to bring them together as much as possible.
Right.
And it's a big jump for the scientific community a lot of times. And maybe science is a big jump for the metaphysical community. So it'll be interesting to see how you're bridging the gap on both sides. So
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll start with our blessings. Kathy, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everybody. O satari la rocha eru peru oshiaru. La senoro la torre mas, shukura mataru laru uruisha, hakura pari nosha, sharula tokoro aruna mare, pale noturu, ashana manosha le da siru, loro domiano, tahuperi makari osha fatura vanzi, lilo oro adunai, atoro halana malosa shatuka, atoro asa, lale uro mataru tudasi, halelo ashurumasi. Namaste.
Namaste. Okay, Don?
Thank you, Karen. Blessings, everyone. Taratushna lekashna novitakanta bohusanta. Tianta haroro katuro tuhinda kashke. Tara unrumasnali, nalahuske ketura kashke. Tianto ustmakahan, tasutuanetsi, tianta. Tuanta kula onimia katiat kushke evo. Tenta.
Namaste. Thank you. Max, did you want to do a blessing?
Oh, I can do my usual chant. Halla 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 om na 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 om. Oh la ya halla 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 halla
Started working with tuning forks now.
Oh, I love them. One. Yeah. I work with just with one.
Just with one. And what do you? Is that to balance energies, to grab a tone? What are you doing with that?
Eileen McCusick, Tuning the Field. Check out the book, Eileen McCusick, Tuning the Biofield. And she discovered that traumas are located in a certain place outside of the body in aura. At least that is the signature of that trauma, and right. I experienced it myself. And the father of the trauma is in the past, the father is from the body, and a usual aura is like 2 meters around the body, 2 meter radius. So the healer goes and hits the fork, senses where the trauma is. You can just feel it supernaturally. You feel it through etheric fields. And once you find it, you grab it and carry it to the chakras and just place it in the chakras and allow it to be absorbed back into the body. And it works.
Wow, cool. Very cool. I think I have heard of that book, and I have a friend who's a sound healer, and he talks about that book all the time. So yeah, cool.
I wrote to her, suggested to her that I will help her editing her next book, because there were she's very much, she has a scientific mind, but she doesn't have a background, so a couple times she made tiny scientific mistakes, and I would be happy to fix them.
That would be very good. Speaking of science, you're a scientist. Did you like that segue? That was pretty good, right? And speaking of science, no.
Speaking of science, yes.
Yeah. So speaking of science, you are a scientist. You're a molecular biologist, which means that you study biology on the molecular level. And your passion is DNA. So what does that mean? And why don't you talk about, because I did watch the last couple of interviews you did, and one of the things people may not know about you is a little bit your background. You studied in Russia, then you came to the U.S. But what really sort of pointed you in this direction to look at DNA? And then also, well, we'll just start with that. What made you really be passionate about DNA?
I always wanted to be great. I wanted a Nobel Prize. I wanted to be called professor. So I was looking for a way to make an impact. And I don't know, is it genetic, or is it in Russia they just teach you by examples of great revolutionaries, great scientists, and the whole culture is about greatness. You have to try to make an impact. And at least for me, it worked really well. I went to a special mathematical school for where kids are, parents praise kids for doing science, and we were nurtured to think about just making a huge impact. And I'm still trying. It's like I'm 56. I'm still trying. I didn't until about a few years ago. Until these last 3 papers, all I published, I think, is just very tiny impact. It's like one of the 100,000 scientists, just one of many millions papers. You just do a little bit, but there is nothing to be really proud of. So, but I was looking to make an impact, and first I found a book about chemistry, and it was written in 56. I think I still have it on the shelf, saying that chemistry will change the world to the better. And that moved me to the chemical direction. I read in the summer, I read the textbook on chemistry before we started studying it in school. It's like 6th grade or something. And then I was excited about chemistry, and then I went to chemical department of Moscow University, and then they realized chemistry is toxic, and it's overdone, and I was poisoned several times. One time it was pretty bad on the liver, but you really realize that, chemistry can be very dangerous. Anyway, and then I realized, wait a second, there is DNA, and DNA is everything. DNA programs everything. Maybe there is something interesting. Maybe can make an impact there. But I was really behind in many ways of others who kind of went straight into theoretical biology. I was never interested in biology. Actually, still, my wife looks at the plants and she sees plants, and when I look at the same direction, I see the fire hydrant. You see, there is a landscape, and I see technology there first, and then plants second. It's just, I'm an engineer by nature, and my kids are engineers by nature. But it goes very easy for us to think about engineering. And anyway, DNA is present in every cell. And it is a program, and it is very simple. It was read about 20 years ago. The whole human genome was sequenced, so we know the whole sequence. It's about 3 billion bases, which is about 3 gigabytes, and it can fit on a flash drive on your smartphone. You can send it by through Google Drive. You can. It's about a big. It's about a DVD, so you can put a genome on a DVD. And most humans, we have very similar genomes, about 99% is similar, maybe 99.7%. Tiny difference. So,
can I ask you a question? Do you think that, and just in the because each human is unique. I mean, they're the same basic structure, but just to have, isn't it more simple in nature to only have like 2.8% differential between everything, so that you have more infinite possibilities to have infinite possibilities between every single human, every single human being, to have like a higher percentage of DNA difference? I would think that it would have to, the structure would fall apart if it was so different between individuals. It'd have to be highly the same and just a very small difference to give enough to give height differentials, hair color, eye color, skin color, constitution differences. But the basis there needs to be a symmetry between all of it, so that it can maintain its structure. Is that correct or not?
All said is very well. There is very little I can add, but when we look at behaviors, let's go back to my so-called career, or lack of it.
Yeah, sure.
Lack of the career, but the life path. I was not aware about major biological questions. I was I was driven by money, and I wanted to make an impact in money-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So Soviet Union fell apart in around 1990, 30 years ago. And Soviet economy fell apart, and we were really excited about free market. Free market coming to Moscow, it was very interesting. And advertisements, banks, all of that just appeared from nowhere. We didn't have any of that. Until then, everybody was a federal employee.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine, like everybody? It was illegal not to be a federal employee.
Right.
You would get into trouble for refusing to be a federal employee. You have to choose, and often they would assign you to a certain job, but you cannot really have, like, every flower shop, which was like very few, would have to be governmental. Anyway, so free market, and I thought maybe I can make money by developing DNA diagnostics, and that's where my many years of my life was invested into DNA diagnostics, automation of it. I was thinking, like, let's make a great impact by developing a device which would extract DNA automatically and diagnose automatically. Even at that time, we could diagnose, COVID virus through PCR. It's a 30-year-old technology. It was like 90s was already the technology when we could do everything automatically. And I was thinking, to exclude possibility of infection, you take the sample and you put it in a device. It will spin and do everything, and then will output on a computer, will output the signal. So I developed it with colleagues. It was funded by the institute, and I went to America to sell it. We sold the license. It was I made so many mistakes that it's painful to recall that. But after a while, nothing happened. So I was started applying for jobs. But visiting America in '93 was a big event in my life, because, like, I knew that we want to go. Russia was falling apart, and our illusions were. We were disillusioned about the democratic process and free market very fast. It's important to. It was an important time, very important time, and now I think what we experienced back then was a great system with great opportunities. We tried to reform it, and instead it broke. It's like, try to fix something, and it completely breaks. Like, you try to fix your laptop, and you see that the smoke comes with it and then explodes, something like that. Mm-hmm. You try to fix your car, and then it explodes. So the system just imploded. It just fell on itself. And then there was a hope of something good happening, but then we saw the dark side of the freedom, that crime was everywhere, and without the government, crime becomes the new government. And so let me describe it. It's an important thing for as a pretext for everything that happens now. It is an important thing for the world. It's a nice analogy for what happens to the world right now. Like the first day we had government collapsed, people start coming out to the street, maybe the second day, and started bartering and selling stuff because they needed food, they needed money, and there was, at the end, there was no money, no food. So people started bringing stuff and selling like old possessions. And every corner, every intersection, we had people, peddlers, people selling stuff and bartering stuff. And very soon, we didn't have farmers, we had government farms, but people would start going somewhere, bringing food to the city and selling food. So the market was on streets right away. And that's very educational because, the only reason we don't see peddlers and sellers on the street is because it's repressed by the system. If people have opportunity to produce and do business, the business would flourish. But soon after there was racketeering, so every corner was controlled by some local racketeer, and they would tax every seller, every peddler, everyone who is selling stuff. And then soon after, the local government started taking charge of that and moved people in kiosks, so it's much easier to collect taxes from a kiosk rather than from the street. And a few years later, they prohibited kiosks. Now everybody has to be in a permanent building, and because permanent buildings is even easier to tax. Mm-hmm. So the trade went into the regular Western style stores, and the government became the main criminal, the main villain. And in the East, in Russia and Far East, it's natural for people to believe that the government has to be the main villain, and there is nothing surprising for people that government is not honest and is not and is very selfish. But in the West, it's a nice illusion that people really believe that they rule their country and that the government is actually supposed to be good. So that's an interesting phenomenon which produces nice people. And anyway, so I went to America and I discovered, and I wanted to escape, right? And there was a joke. It's not funny. It's not funny. I will tell you, it's not funny. So okay. A Jew comes to a group of Jews and he says, "It doesn't matter what we're talking about, but it's worth going. It is worth going, and it means it's worth emigrating." Mm-hmm. So it means explanation is that whatever we were speaking about was always about immigration, where to go, when to go. That's the main topic of Jews in Russia. It was in that time and before. So the choice was Israel, English-speaking countries, and that was about it. Like all English-speaking countries. And about America, we heard that a lot of nonsense. The movies that they showed us were about really bad side of America, like shootings and violence. And it was so violent, so scary. And the legend was that it's a wild world where you can survive. So, and then in '93, I had an opportunity to go, and I saw, the most prosperous parts of America. It was Stanford University and good and Manhattan. Yeah, Stanford and Manhattan. That was my sampling of America, and I was so impressed. It was so wonderful. So I started applying. I used my computer skills to just automate sending resumes to all scientists I can find. So every scientist in the world received my resume, and I started receiving and I applied automatically to lots of semi-automatically applied to many universities. No, it was on paper, but I automated the application process, and I applied maybe to 200 places, and I started receiving lots of formal rejection letters. and all my bathroom was, all the walls were in those letters, like no, 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 no. It was a very interesting experience. I was like really
Why
surprised.
did you put them on the wall? For inspiration?
I don't know. It was more like supernatural. Yeah, it was a practical magic.
I knew a comedian. He was a writer in New York, and he used to have to submit screenplays and things like that. And he would take every rejection letter and put it on his wall as an inspiration to keep.
Yeah, I know. It was all these rejection letters was so sweet and so pretty. They were printed on special paper. Anyway, I was to one of the refusals. I wrote a letter saying, please explain why. But I wrote it in a joking way and say, please fill the form. And I just put some several questions. Max is not good because blah blah blah. So I was just really desperate. And then there was the person who took me. He just realized, that I'm different. And also I had a website. In '93 I had the first website. It just started. The internet just started. There was like Gopher before internet, and there was first HTML pages, and I was like among the first to put the description of my I was of my boss's lab, basically the lab where I worked, and it also impressed my boss, my future boss. So I came to America as a technologist to sequence DNA and genotype DNA.
Okay.
And I didn't think about much about the biology yet. It was just practical application, and my boss was thinking about behavior genetics and schizophrenia, how DNA genes, how gene mutations contribute to schizophrenia, because schizophrenia has a huge hereditary component. Mm-hmm. It goes in families, so logically we were hoping to find the mutations there. And we did find, that's one of my most cited papers, we did find nice it's called linkages, so regions of mutations, pretty big one, like 10 megabases, like 10 million bases, 10 million letters. So it's not one letter, but we at least found pretty nice regions where we are certain this region contributes to schizophrenia. And then I was starting to be interested in behavior, and they gave me a smoking project, which was very fun. And I started smoking just to a smoking project, a smoking nicotine cigarette project. Oh. So obviously, to study the subject, I started smoking just to understand why people would smoke and get addicted. It was very interesting. And I actually like smoking. Smoking is great, except you get sick of that. You get lung cancer.
Yeah.
And nicotine also collapses your blood vessels. So most of the chronic smokers, they get their feet really cold and they lose their feet, and also they lose. It's very strange. They lose one foot and one eye. So lots of people, old smokers, they have the foot cut out, amputated, and no one eye. I know for sure. So that's but that's a result of smoking and heart problems. Mm-hmm. And anyway, it grounds you, and you become you start smoking, you see the world, you like really get grounded in the world. You can see it clearly, and your thinking becomes very clear. So, that's why people smoke.
Do you think that's because of the deep breathing, or is that because of the nicotine?
Oh, that's mostly nicotine. Part of that is that fire, and part of that is that tar in the smoke. It's tar by itself is also bioactive, but nicotine is number one. Obviously, it's an interesting drug. It has its own receptor, acetylcholine receptor.
We can talk about that. There's a lot of Indian tribes that use in tobacco as a plant medicine, and they use it as a connection point to the earth, but that's different than smoking. I think you get some of that effect. Maybe that's why people like smoking, but there is a whole philosophy of tobacco as a plant medicine.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a magical plant that allows you to do wonderful things, but it got abused in many ways. First, they increased the amount of nicotine a lot, right? So they produce cigarettes with tons more nicotine. Then they put chemicals there,
Yeah.
and except if you know, if it is a natural tobacco, it would be different. But it was very chemically modified tobacco. So I would assume that if you do like it as a ritual once a year from natural tobacco in a pipe, that would be very different. But using it like as people smoke 2 packs a day is just
Crazy town.
it's very bad for health. But on the other hand, it allows you to behaviorally, it allows you to do the work which otherwise you wouldn't do. And it was great in 70s and 80s, especially in 70s, like when the
Like
whole
what?
world falls.
What do you mean allows you to do the work you wouldn't do? Like what? Explain what you mean.
It helps coping with unfriendly reality, or
Okay.
it's coping with unfriendly bosses to do the work which you would hate. But if you smoke, you keep doing it. So it's and when people started, Americans, Westerners started modifying, when you guys modified your world in such a way that the work started to be more pleasant, then you could get rid of smoking. But like if the work is really nasty, like if you are, I don't know, working for a really bad boss and very bad environment, then smoking is allows you to cope with that. So now with this interesting situation, I think smoking, some people might consider smoking because it would allow you to cope with all that fear and nonsense. But it's very weird. Some people are so dependent. If you start smoking, you can't stop, because the nicotine tricks your brain in believing that it's good for you, and it tricks it in such a wonderful way, that, or magical way, that it's really part of you still believes it's good for you. The only reason I don't smoke is because there are enzymes that process tar, and my enzymes are not good enough, so I just get poisoned by it. But some people process tar much better, so they don't feel as bad from smoking. After 2 months of smoking, even I smoke like 1/10 of the dose. After 2 months, I still get like sick. I get sick. So for me, it's obvious that it's bad for me. But for others, it's not. They feel better, so they think it's better for them. So DNA, and then I started doing the research in nicotine addiction, or genetics of nicotine addiction, because some people, families would be like more addicted, some families would be less addicted, something like that. So we found some genetic linkages, like areas in the genome which would be responsible for that. And then I went to another place where it was like paradise. I have lots of funding, lots, like comparatively lots. You can order stuff, you can order stuff, essentially. It's like federal research institution, and you get lots of free time and freedom. You know, in federal research institutions, they put you in very aesthetically unpleasant places, so they can claim that they pretend that they don't waste money. So it's very aesthetically gray and unpleasant, concrete and stuff. But you can order stuff, and it takes time to get it, to receive, because it's bureaucracy. But then you have more funding, and you don't, because bureaucratic oversight is slow, and there is a lot of unqualified workers in those oversight, so really nobody cares what you do. So you can do a lot of stuff, except you can't publish something which goes against the scientific consensus, unless it's like a really strong science. In any case, I had time to think. I didn't have a boss who would bother me with like every day, pushing, produce more results. And I had the time to think. It was great. And then I did my research, and I analyzed. It was a very interesting project. So next bench was a scientist who was analyzing genetics of male homosexuality. And it has a great genetic component. Not every male homosexual is hereditary. It could be a free choice. But some are hereditary. It's defined by from mother's side. Very interesting. And anyway, by genes from the mother's side. I would say maybe 25% get it genetically. Or it's more like predisposition. You're predisposed to go this way, but then you make a free choice.
Is that the same in women or not?
We didn't study women, and I think an educated guess would be it could be lower in women a lot. It could be much lower. Okay, I will switch to that. So we studied behavior. I studied behavior too, and my main conclusion was, again, it's educated guess. I can't prove, but my main conclusion was that genetics contributes about 1/3 of the personality.
Okay.
And 1/3 would be astrology, and 1/3 would be the soul preferences, the past lives. So 1/3 genetics, 1/3 past lives, 1/3 astrology. They all overlap, like genetics overlap with astrology, and astrology overlaps with past lives, and genetics overlaps with past lives. So the soul chooses and designs its own genetics, its own genome. So the mutations are controlled by the soul, because in our world they are random, but from the soul's perspective, from the spirit world, they have control over random. That's.
You think they're more like the structural bearings that allow a certain personality to arise, the other things. But it's just like if you build a house and you want the house to be shaped a certain way, then the structure of it is going to have to have certain elements. You're going to have different supports in different areas that would allow that to the result to be, say, a triangle shaped house. But maybe to a person who didn't understand that, they might just think that was the luck of the draw. Is that kind of what you mean? Because if the soul,
I don't know, your thought wasn't clear to me.
Well, you just said that the soul designs individual,
right?
And you said that you think that you're saying that none of it is random,
right?
The genetics are not random, the astrology is not random, and nor is a personality random. And my thought was, so that means that even if it appears random, the soul has selected that gene, that DNA structure, that astrology, so that the personality can have that experience.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so at this point, I wasn't as educated about the soul yet. I was interested. I was very interested. Even in Russia, my grandfather was a scientist, but he was interested in structure of water, in biological properties of structure of water. He was a physical chemist, so that's what much of his career he was a respected professor, and much of his career he made on water structures and water electrical chemistry. Pretty official, but he felt that this is a very promising direction. He was ahead of his time, 70 years ahead of his time, and he also was into herbalism. So I was receiving a lot of letters with different recipes with different herbs, but unfortunately they disappeared. I lost them. My relatives lost them. Anyway, he pushed me in that direction, and I visited a lab of Tsvetkov in Russia, who was studying the structure of water and biological properties of structured water. So I was exposed at least to the ideas, but the Tsvetkov lab had wonderful people, but it didn't have fancy equipment, and I don't think it had any money. So I was oriented. I needed to feed my family, so I had 2 small kids, so it was important to get the money. Anyway, in that federal environment, I was able to think about astrology, and it was a time when the predecessor of Facebook appeared. It was called LiveJournal, and lots of my friends went there and brought me there, and I realized that they don't give their names. It was aliases. Facebook has real names. A LiveJournal, you could call yourself whatever, and but they give you the date of birth, and they provide their interests. And it was obvious that, if you have a date of birth and interest, you can do astrological research. It was very interesting. So I created a research group, and it was the first project where we had people coming together and online and research in astrology. It was very interesting. We found some programmers, volunteer programmers, and we found some interesting correlations. And then with these correlations, I went to astrological, like more serious astrologers. I discovered lots of other astrological research that uses statistics. So my idea was, if astrology affects behavior and genetics affects behavior, how is it possible? And I realized, it's not published yet as a paper yet, but I realized that there could be some biochemical mechanism, which is very weird from a scientific standpoint. But essentially what happens is the relative position of the sun and the earth. It's like angle of the axis of the planet, but also that angle of where it was located. So it's the angle of the sun above horizon, but also the time of the year also factor in. So that position during the moment of birth affects the behavior for the rest of the life, which is, how could it be, right? And affects it cyclically, right? So at any point of life, you have certain positions of planets and so on. Right. So I was thinking that what is different about the moment of birth is that the brain is reprogrammed.
The brain is what?
Reprogrammed. Yeah, because before the birth, the child belongs to the mother. It's fed by the mother. The temperature is controlled by the mother. The energies are mother's. But then the child is disconnected, and she starts breathing, sucking milk, keeping the temperature, and that's about it, and screaming. But these are very major changes in behavior. So the brain has to be reprogrammed, and the DNA has to be reprogrammed in the brain. And I discovered later, like many years later, I discovered that yes, it's this reprogramming was characterized. It's real, and the way of reprogramming is called epigenetic reprogramming. Epigenetics means that there is like sequence of letters A, G, C, T, 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 3 gigabytes of sequence in every cell. But on these letters, on top of them, there is a chemical modification which is called methylation. It's the main way of reprogramming, which basically placing highlights on the sequence, highlights on the text, and it changes the message of the text. So use that program, don't use that program, use that gene, don't use that gene. So that genetic epigenetic modification happens the whole wave in the first few minutes of the, or maybe hours of the after the birth. There is a wave of reprogramming in the brain, like brum, and the person starts breathing. So the life, like there is that idea that life comes into the body with the breath and leaves the body with the last breath. So that's about. So the idea was that the Earth has a field, electromagnetic field. At the moment, I was thinking about electromagnetic, but maybe also like other dimensional fields as well. And the sun and the position of the Earth in the sun and in the solar system changes the polarity of the field. So polarity is polarization, like is the property of the wave, and the wave can be squished one way, it can be round, it can be squished, so the wave can propagate like that, but polarized wave is squished, it goes like that. And more complex polarizations, they have also like twists and helices in waves. So I was thinking that maybe the Earth field is cyclically changes its structure as the Earth cycles around the Sun, and also maybe different planets are modifying the structure of the planets of Earth's field, and that field affects the methylation. So that was okay. Can you mute everybody there?
Yes, 1 second. Yeah. 1 moment. Okay. Let me.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. It's okay now.
So that's it. So that was the hypothesis. I didn't proceed any further, but that the work that can be done, it would prove astrology basically.
So what my question is that at the time that the person is born, they go through that your proposed mental reprogramming.
Yep.
Alignment with the sun. Is it like at that moment they get a sort of seal of within their DNA? I don't want to say a seal, but a sort of
imprint,
correct.
Imprint of the Earth vibrations in the moment of reprogramming.
They are sort of governed by the energies that because especially the way a personality is, personalities have to do with core values a lot of times, and personalities also have to do with the way that a person reacts to their environment, so that their ability to react and respond together with their genetic distributions are sealed in that moment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, predispositions, are imprinted, but again, I think the imprints are maybe 30% of the behavior, and they're specializing on certain aspects of behavior, but certain other aspects are free will, and certain other aspects are not from astrology at all. It could be from genes or some other stuff. There was a nice publication, a series of publications, the discovery by a Frenchman, Gaclin discovered in 60s and 70s that there are also genes that define when the baby is born. So the baby gets a gene which tells the baby when he wants to be born, and the baby releases certain signals, hormones, to the mother saying now is the time, and gets out at a certain time. So somehow the genetics predisposes the baby to be born in certain time of the day, which is very interesting.
And if that baby, for whatever reason, due to medical, does this superimpose, does this override anything like where the woman is in a car accident, they have to emergency deliver the baby, or is this is only if everything's moving in a natural way?
Only for natural, but the whole process, as I see it now, there is a third component, which is astrologers pointed me to that, and I kept in mind. But astrologers said that the whole matrix has certain cycles, and the planets are not exactly affecting the baby. The planets are just the handles on the clock showing what is the cyclic nature of the matrix at this moment. So the matrix by itself is changing. So astrology, in a way, is the astrological chart is the position when the life starts in that matrix, and that state of the matrix is imprinting on the baby. So what I'm saying is, it's not only the chemistry of DNA that defines the behavior. It looks like we are made of the wave. We are wave in nature. So we are, from a certain perspective, we are not material. It's all quantum waves. And these quantum waves, on the level of atoms and nuclei of the atoms, they have imprint of the matrix, and they are interacting with the matrix. So it's every atom is a vortex in the matrix, and it has certain history and certain imprints which continue through the life. So it's all more complex. And maybe some of the astrology is imprinted not in the physical body, it's imprinted in non-material bodies like etheric bodies and some other astral Atman and other bodies. So it's all a complicated system, and not everything can be explained through chemistry.
Right. Okay. Perfect. So through your through all of this development over the last several years, what really made you? So explain to people what DNA resonance is and what that actually is and what it is you're studying in regard to it. Please explain in the most layman's terms what it is and what it means.
Sure. So historically, that was the time when I had time to think, and I basically came to the idea. It was 21 years ago, 1999. I came to the understanding that my genetic research doesn't explain everything. There is more than genetics. There is like a big field of metaphysics, and it's in addition to psychiatry and psychology, which is supposed to study the soul, there is metaphysics that studies the soul. So Carl Jung studies and Freud and psychoanalysis, all of these studies about the soul, lots of metaphysics. At that moment I was just starting in that direction. So it was a crisis, and I kind of was looking for a way out of the crisis. How can I research such a complicated field? Especially in Russia, we have like the fear, pretty much religious fear of supernatural. It was a prohibited area. You are not supposed to go there, and you get punished for going into the supernatural, into metaphysics. And it's still there. I mean, even in the West, lots of people are scared by anything, especially the signs which are satanic signs, like with bones and skulls, and so it's something very prohibited. It's related to evil, and you don't go there. Now, and here I was nostalgic about Russia, and I visited Russia for the first time when I got appropriate visa from America. I was afraid that I will leave my family and won't be able to come back. It was at those times the borders were pretty tight, and so I visited Russia. I come to my institute, to my boss's lab, and chatting with people, and there was a person working next door, and I knew her name, but we didn't ever speak about anything significant. She brings me a book and says, check it out, and I still have this book here. And after that, we didn't speak it. We never spoke again. So she just brought me a book, and the book was about resonance, DNA resonance. Written in 1988, but as I find out, Richard Alan Miller had outlined the whole idea in 1972. So the ideas were already around for about 20 and even 30 years. They were already around. So DNA resonance. The book was called Wave Genome, and the idea was that DNA, although it is a chemical, it's a chemical molecule. It has a crystalline, very organized structure, which everybody knows. That this structure is producing waves. And these waves from all DNA from the body, from each cell, create a biofield, and the biofield is controlling the shape of the body, the function of the body. And right now I had the participate also in the work of mind and emotions and stuff. So that's a very simple idea, that we have each cell has a system similar to a smartphone, which can calculate things. Basically has its own computer, and also it has its own radio, so it can send and receive radio signals. We still don't know what we do know. It's not radio waves, but some sort of electromagnetic waves, and now we understand it's also sound waves. So So the idea is that each cell it has DNA inside, and the DNA creates a smartphone-like device which allows it to talk to within the cell and to each other cells, and even between the bodies there is electromagnetic communication. And in addition, we think there is, we are sure there is non-electromagnetic communication, which is, we call it etheric field, but there is many other words for that, like scalar field, and I keep forgetting some other names for the field, but basically the field, biofield, which is not part of it is not measurable by our devices, but it's measurable by conscious beings and by living beings. So that is sort of kind of obvious now, so I'm not surprised anyone that DNA is filled with light and sound and it talks. So there is no news here for you guys, but it still would be a great big news for science. The science is completely ignoring that fact until recently, until my publications basically. There were some theoreticians who proposed that in the last, since 72, so last almost 50 years they proposed it, but there was no funding, no research of DNA involvement in this, nothing of consequence. There was no serious research. There was no evidence. There was some theorizing, but no real evidence. And 20 years ago, when I got this book, I realized that using genetics, one can formulate the code how the DNA sequence makes this biofield, and the code how the biofield affects the DNA. It's like the conversation goes in both directions. Because we have the human genome, we should be able to read from human genome the sequence and to understand what it means. So if we read the sequence of an elephant, we can say that's the sequence of the elephant, it produces an elephant. And we read another sequence and then we say that's a Drosophila, it's a fly. Right now, if we give to a scientist the sequence, they don't have, they can't read it basically. We can find the proteins, but between the proteins there is a lot of non-coding DNA, which is about 95% of DNA is non-coding, so it's called junk DNA. And everybody knows that it's not junk, it codes for something important, but people just don't know what it is. So it was an obvious idea that junk DNA codes for the waves, for the biofield. Any questions so far?
Yes, Alex has a question.
Can you hear me?
You good?
I'm good.
You good.
Okay, Max, about epigenetics and the birth of the child.
Can you speak farther from my microphone? It's just too loud.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're too close to the mic. Just
Now it's okay?
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. About the birth of the child and epigenetics. I agree and disagree. So in the womb, the child have all the emotion of the mother and also the information from the mother and the father. And I agree, when it's born naturally, there is, let's say, traumatic event. Also, when with the first breath of air, the child have the new emotional, let's say, activation in the emotional body, in the body and an emotional electromagnetic field. How about that?
All sounds perfect. Thank you. Yeah, I just realized we are so much deep in science that we can speak another many hours, many more hours. We can speak many more hours about science. But I really wanted to get back to the politics. Yeah, I wanted to speak about politics. So all you said is perfect. So yes, the birth is the trauma, and many people the whole life we just kind of try to heal that trauma. We want to come back to the womb and be again in a loving environment and not to worry about survival. So 1999 I was initiated into that, and I was trying to discover that thing. I was trying to convince my bosses to do the research in that direction, and I realized I just discovered that there is a lot of resistance in the mainstream science against that kind of research. There is like people lose their careers, they get fired, and I have experienced some of that too, but basically people know what is funded and what is not allowed. So the research in biofields was pretty much prohibited. Now it's a little more relaxed, but still it is very restricted. Part of that is because it is the domain of weapons and mind control weapons. So that's classified by the military of corresponding countries. Like every country has the program, but Russia has it, America has it. It's already linked to the Amazon books, so you can read about that. It's the keywords. I think it's called MK Ultra. Yeah, MK Ultra. They use some drugs and fields to affect the mind. So it's all published now, and in Russia they're also very strong about that. Now they experiment how they can affect the crowds to make revolutions and to pacify the revolution. So that's another research. They kind of have ways to focus the wave on the crowd and affect the minds. So I was visited by a professional skeptic around 2002. I don't remember exactly, but I have a record. We had a mail exchange. So at that moment I published somewhere only in the interest groups, maybe Live Journal, some other interest groups. I didn't publish then. I was trying to keep the mainstream career going. I needed to feed my family. So the skeptic came, and apparently he was looking for a victim. He was trying to find out what I'm working on, and then to publish his paper criticizing my work. But since I didn't publish anything, I didn't plan to publish anything, he lost the interest. So I was too little of a fish to be bothered. But he was a professor just specializing in keeping the mainstream science clean from astrology and other prohibited influences. But I had a sense, I had an experience of actually seeing how it works, how do they keep the science clean. Another reason for the mainstream science to not go into the fields is because field-based devices, field-based therapies would compete with drugs, and pharmaceutical industry is one of the main foundations of the modern economy, and the key of the pharmaceutical industry that the doctor prescribes something to the patient and the patient keeps buying the drug. And it goes nowadays, some drugs are about $50,000 per year, like for arthritis, and it's kind of became normal, and it's a huge factor in the economy. So if you replace a drug with electromagnetic device or physical therapy device, which does the same, even better, then you can sell the device once, but it won't be that expensive, and it wouldn't get the money continuous profit from that. You just sell it once. Except there are situations when you can rent the device and you can sort of plug the person into the device and then get the money going. But it's much less developed area, and the pharmaceutical industry just doesn't want to go there. They love the all the biofield research is pretty much restricted in most of the world. In Russia, it's also not funded. There is like pretty strong governmental control not to release it to the academy. So it's very, very it's very visible. in Russia it's very visible. Here it's very visible. You start speaking about the fields and you get repressed right away.
I have a question about that. So,
Uh-huh.
as a scientist, I had always thought, well, even if the government was repressing it, I would still want to be one of the scientists studying it.
Right. So the field is being developed by people who are pretty much independent. If you can get your independent money, then you can do research. And most of the researchers in the field of biofields, they're funded either by military, which is the most well-funded and most established labs.
Right.
And one of the leaders is in a few labs are in Czechia. Pretty good research is done in Switzerland, some in Germany, and the rest is kind of random. Like there is in India, it goes pretty well in terms of it fits really well in their culture. So
Yeah.
they study it in this way, but there is not many publications. But at least
Yoga. Yeah.
There is something coming from there. Mostly like theoretical works and mathematical works, modeling. There is a little bit in South America. So where is less control, there is more research. And in America and Canada, it's pretty much more strict. But in America and Canada, what happens is that doctors who have their salary paid by the medical profession, they can afford at least publish on that topic. So they kind of incorporate the devices into their medical practice, and they publish the results from using the devices, which is the main set of publications providing real data.
You know, I was thinking, like, you know, if you had something like an Area 51 for DNA residents or whatever it was, I wouldn't be so upset about not being able to share it with the public, because my own personal curiosity would drive me to want to work in that way. But have you ever had the chance or the opportunity to work in one of those programs, or is that something that you haven't even had been able to access or wanted to access even?
That's a great question. You know, I always like I always think for these years, like 20 years, I'm in this topic. I was thinking, if they give me a lot of money and let me work in a classified area, would I go? And luckily, I didn't have to face this dilemma, because you can see Hucolo is a very open forum community, and I speak my mind all the time, and they know that I speak my mind all the time, so they wouldn't even offer me, because I don't keep secrets. I like playing with open cards. I do a step and I publish it right away. So I was collaborating with a lab which was funded by DARPA, and DARPA is the most outrageous department of the military. They do most risky research, which is too outrageous to the public. So, but they kind of dress it well. They hide the dark side of the military research and show the positive side. Like, for example, mind control. Obviously, they say we want our soldiers to be in good shape, and if the soldier is panicking, then it's detrimental to in the field, like during the battle. It's detrimental even to their health. So, how about we control the soldier from the distance, and this way he will be more stable. Which makes a lot of sense, right? Yeah. If the soldier gets crazy, you kind of press a button and he gets like some drugs and waves, and they become normal again, and then they can fight. So that makes sense. But then you get soldiers remotely controlled, which is like, yeah, we can do that. But then you start thinking about that it can go even further. Why do you control your own soldiers? Why don't you control the generals from the other side? If you can control the leader of the enemy, then you don't even need to fight.
Right. Well, true. That's true. So, I mean, there's always the military application and the sinister aspect. However, I do understand that some things they would want to keep quiet only because, not because of the good application, but because also protecting from another country or another body taking it and applying it in a sinister way, whether the country that's discovering it is doing that or not. I mean, there, the thing that I do understand is that good doesn't have an agenda, but evil always does. And so there, even if your intentions are the best and you're discovering something, then it could be, you might also have to be, concerned about what happens when this falls into the wrong hands, because there is always an agenda out there. So I do understand some of the secrecy. I wish if some of the technology that we believe that they have could better humanity, they would release it, but that's another discussion. However, as a scientific mind, and if you're driven by the seeking of knowledge, I wouldn't blame you if you were wanting to participate in that kind of research.
Right. Thank you for giving me encouragement. Yeah. So what happened was that I was collaborating with a place which was funded, academic place, very very pure academic place, very far from soldiers, like very basic science. The academic place which was funded by DARPA, and I hoped to get the money from DARPA too. And it was close, very close in terms of the waves. So I got in contact with DARPA, and I keep sending them my publications. If I publish something, the next day I send it to DARPA so they get it. There is like a contact in DARPA, like email, and they say thanks. Keep sending. So they're aware of my research, and I think I do it in part for self-protection, so I'm not doing anything in secret. I'm playing with open cards, and they know what I'm doing, and they don't have even to follow me because they get it directly from me.
Right. So
and
you're sharing. You're doing.
Next day after I publish first, and next day I send it to them.
Yeah, I understand.
But I publish right away. If I discover something, like it takes a couple months to write it, and I submit, and then it takes a month to review, and then after 3 months it gets out. It's pretty fast.
Do you ever get feedback from them, or is it just you just send the information?
The feedback is that they're very smart. Yeah. They are very smart. They are very aware. They know the literature I know. So the feedback is that they get it. I mean, that's, I guess, it's the only place where they read my publications with care. I don't know how many people, maybe one person, but at least one person is aware. Anyway, and I submitted my application for funding to DARPA, and I don't remember how they responded, but I think that was like standard response that, not enough data, send more data. They actually they don't fund a lot of new researchers. They go through their standard kind of paths with already trusted researchers. They don't fund random people. Right. It's like in an academic world, anyone can apply, and anyone can compete sort of equally. In DARPA, in military funding, they always like to fund their own trusted researchers. Yeah. So it's hard to get into this system. I tried to get through someone else, but it was still hard. Anyway, I applied also to the military, and I got a response that, when you have more data, apply again. But really, my research is so basic, it's far from application. And they don't fund a lot. Like the budget, the open, like official budget of DARPA is very little. And I know there is like secret budget, but the official is very little, and they give very little money. It's not even comparable to what institutes of health give. It's like 1/5 of that. So it's not even worth bothering with them, I guess. I don't see. I stopped applying. I stopped applying to either of the sources, to Institutes of Health or DARPA, because it just didn't work. It didn't work. They didn't want to fund something. They didn't want officially to fund something that controversial, because if they use taxpayers' money for funding something which somebody can criticize in the press, then they get in big trouble. That I realized. Finally, I realized. It took me a lot of time to figure out why they don't. But they found something only that public would approve, and public wouldn't approve astrology or even DNA resonance research, because it's too outrageous for the mainstream.
Right. So my question to you is back to the DNA resonance research that you're doing now. What is it that you are ultimately hoping to prove or discover? I mean, I'm sure you can't say what you would discover because you haven't discovered it yet. But what is it? What is your hypothesis about DNA resonance or one of your hypotheses, or the main one that's driving your research at this moment?
Thanks. That's a great question. So I actually pronounced it already. I want to discover the language, the code. I call it the resonance code, DNA resonance code, which would allow you to read the genome and say what's written there. Like to read this 95% of non-coding DNA. I believe that it has the program for the shape of the body, for the function of the body, for the function of each cell, and also for the mind. I believe most of our human genome is actually thinking.
Right.
And I published already that hypothesis. So once we get the code, we will be able to understand how the shape of the body is designed and how our mind works.
Oh, go ahead.
And when we read the genome from the elephant, we would create the image of the elephant just from reading that text. It's like reading a JPEG file or JPEG file. Like if you read MP3 file, you hear this voice. If you read JPEG file, you see the image. That's the format for the images. So I think when we read the human genome file, we will see the picture of the person, and when we read the elephant genome file, we see the picture of the elephant. That's simple. I mean, the hypothesis is straightforward. You have to be able to read. And the main discovery is already done, already published. The first step in the direction is done. I used the data of others. I started from, I was funded by some of the federal grants. I had to really twist my theory so it would fit into mainstream. And the way I did it is by proposing that we wouldn't study DNA resonance, but we will use patterned light to activate certain genes and that gene constructs, and that would be used as drug delivery system. Basically, you put first certain virus in the body, and then you shine the light to activate the virus. The virus will be activated and will do something positive, like reduce inflammation for arthritis. And it was funded because it had a drug component. That I realized I needed to put the drug component in the ground. And if there is a drug, even a viral drug, then you can it fits in a permitted area, and you use light only to activate the viral drug. But I was able to experiment with that and did some experimental research. But then my funding kind of dried out. It was really hard to get funding, and I realized then, how about we try computational approach and to use the data of others. There is a lot of good published data which is in public databases on genome and gene expression, and is the structure of chromatin, which is basically structure of chromosomes. And the reason is that publicly funded researchers are obligated to upload their data to the public databases. So it's very good. If institutes of health or some other countries, federal government funds the research, they upload it to the database. There is a lot of data in the databases, and we just analyze this data and make sense of it. Essentially, we know the sequences of the genome, and also we know how in which cells, in which situations the genome is active. Basically, which genes are expressed and which sequences are DNA can be wrapped into coils or coiled, uncoiled. So that is the key way how it becomes active or passive, and we now are looking how the resonance patterns in the DNA define its function. So the main discovery that we did was to look at the chemical structure of the double helix, and we specifically were looking for antennas there, like how would a smartphone antenna or electromagnetic antenna would look in a double helix. What is the antenna there? What's the oscillator or resonator? Like in the guitar, it is a string.
Right.
Do you have a guitar around? Like here in the camera and tuning fork, it's that simple oscillator. That's an oscillator. It oscillates. Do 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 do. So we are looking for something like that in DNA.
Right.
And the question was it perpendicular to DNA? Would it oscillate perpendicular or along the DNA? And the second idea was that this oscillator has to be programmed by DNA sequence. So it has to span multiple letters in the DNA. Do, 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 do. And the simplest would be like 2 letters or 3 letters, but more complicated would be like 20 letters, and even more complicated would be 300 letters. And we were thinking that if there was an oscillator, it would be universal. It would be universal for the whole body, so it would be like a major tone for the body. Right? So where is that major tone? It has to be repeated many times in the cell. It has to be repeated many times in the cell. That's definition. So we're looking at the genome. It was 1999 when it just was a aha moment. If it is a major oscillator structure in the genome, it has to be repeated many times. Which structure is repeated many times in the genome? In human genome, there is an obvious sequence. It's called ALU, A-L-U, ALU. It's repeated 1,000,000 times in every cell. It has 300 bases, and it's very magical. So even then I realized, that's the main candidate to be the main oscillator. I presented that in 2003 in a friend's lab who studied the effects of electricity on the development of frog embryos. And he's still doing really good, publishing really nice stuff about electricity and electric regulation. So moving from there, we were looking at the possible oscillators, and we discovered that there are so-called delocalized electrons, where electron doesn't know where it is. It's a chemical thing. It's called chemical resonance, but some electrons are not placed in one place. They kind of redistributed over the molecule. It's called quantum uncertainty or superposition, where it's called tautomers, multiple tautomers coexist at the same time. It's a quantum effect. And DNA is sort of in between big world and micro world, and parts of DNA obey quantum laws where principle of uncertainty of Heisenberg is obeyed, and electrons are distributed between different things. So it's a uncertainty cloud or distributed cloud. So I imagine this, and they're charged, so I imagine like is oscillating cloud of electrons, and it has certain shapes. So we started looking at that, and then my next aha moment was that if there is electron cloud, and it's negatively charged, there should be positively charged cloud to balance it. And how about we look at the protons? And initially it was just a very weird area, because delocalized protons are not as well known. Delocalized electrons, the ones which have clouds, are well known since the beginning of times, like for 100 years, more or less, at least 60 years for sure, 70 years. Linus Pauling from Pasadena was the main scientist who kind of developed that area. But delocalized protons are not well known. The scientists begin to publish on that. So it was a little weird, but I made that step thinking, how about delocalized proton clouds? And then I saw them. Just in the structure, they are there. I didn't even have to discover the program that builds the structure. It can build the proton cloud. So I just used the program, and I just knew where to look, and it was there. So the program already built a cloud, just nobody cared to look at it. Nobody was interested in proton clouds. And I said, proton clouds. it took me like a few months, and I have my colleagues in Russia who work with me, so I kind of hire cheap labor, young people who have not interest in that area, and obviously they brought to me by angels. So lots of people went through me, and as soon as they hear about the clouds and the science, that alternative science, they're spooked away. But few were attracted and stayed. So it was discussion back and forth, and then we were able to formalize the structure of the clouds, look for them in the sequence, see the traces of them in the sequence, and we just discovered that they were enriched in evolution, conserved in evolution. Enriched meaning they are much more, there is many more of them than it would be there by random. The sequences are designed, of our genome are designed to have lots of these clouds. I call them hiders because they are not visible, they are kind of hidden there, hiders. So the hiders, the clouds, the sequences that make the clouds of protons. And then they're conserved in evolution. So basically, from whatever Drosophila, from fly to us, there are certain sequences that go from one species to another, having that cloud structure. And I published that, and it looks very real, and these are basically the first words of the code. We already know where to look. These are sequences that code for resonators. They're like antenna of the smartphone. Mm-hmm. So we published that. People who are already in that field, they notice, they send me a few nice words saying that it's interesting, but everybody else is completely unprimed, so it would take...
I think you would probably get a lot of attention from the yogis in India, because they believe already. And this is within yoga and the resonance within the mantra and the sound and all of those things. There's a couple of questions I have something to follow up, but I want to... Suzanne has a question for you, and if you can take it, then we can come back to this, but I don't know if it's what her question is, but Suzanne, do you have a question?
Hi, Max.
Hey Suzanne.
How are you? I'm eating a lentil beet curry. I'm thinking of you right now.
Oh yeah, curries are great. Yeah, I made a mix. Curries are great. Turmeric. Nice.
So I'm hoping you're going to be able to make it to the workshop.
Oh no, I decided not to go. Yeah, I was thinking about going, but it looks like I would have to fly, and I would have to wear the mask in the airport, and in the airplane that would kill me. I can't wear a mask.
Right.
I can wear a mask like that, but still, it just I like fresh air. I just can't imagine myself sitting in a mask in an airplane. No.
Well, this is just so interesting listening to everything you're up to, and I loved it. I had a question that's so far back now, on etheric fields and how it interacts, how epigenetics, everything you were talking about, what in the environment affects it, and in the world and in the universe.
All right.
So the gravity, and I noticed you said the sun, the moon, etc. So that was it was like so interesting. I don't really know if I bring up a question now so far back, I think it would kind of stop things. So I'm not going to, but I just wanted to say hi.
Oh, thanks.
And I'm glad to hear this update.
Oh, thanks. So, yes, the next step is to connect to realize that much of this resonance that happens in the cell is part of the work of the mind. So that I published that hypothesis back a couple years ago, and it is based on the works of Stuart Hameroff, and it's still unproven, but basically their main understanding, main realization is that right now the model is that the DNA is inside the nucleus of the cell, then it's surrounded by of the neural cell, then there is a cell wall, and there are axons, long neurons that stem out of the cell. So the DNA is separated by a wall by a nuclear wall from whatever main action of electric action in the neurons. And people were thinking that the main conversation between DNA and electric activity of neurons was happening through signaling molecules, basically chemical signaling. And it's very slow, it's really hard to carry information with chemical signals. Now, the main aha moment was that there is a communication through waves, which goes with the speed of light. So DNA is oscillating in some sort of electromagnetic waves, and there are optical guides which connect the electrical activity in neurons with DNA. And also there is it's called like meridians, right? In traditional Chinese medicine, meridians. So we realized what others already knew, that the meridians are the channels, physical channels made out of microtubules, which work as optical guides, transferring these waves throughout the body between different cells. And what we suggested is that these optical guides of meridians plug into the cells, connect to the DNA optically, and the DNA talks through the speed of light, with the speed of light, different DNA genomes from different cells talk to each other, so the whole body creates a network, a matrix.
Kind of like trees talk.
Yeah, kind of like trees. So the whole body makes a matrix of interconnected nuclei. Each of them connects DNA, and this whole genome is plugged into that system. So we think with the whole body, and it happens through basically through light and sound.
Perfect. Alex has a question. I have a comment. One thing that was becoming clear to me as we were talking, and I was thinking about mantra and sound and how that's affecting everything on a cellular level as well, and that there's a lot of study in India. Have you tried to channel DNA? Oh
yeah, we did a lot of all of that. Was since 2013 I was constantly asking questions through Jim, and directly I was asking
and has
questions.
Any of that affected your research and discoveries in what you've...
You see, it works in a way that when you ask the right question, the answer comes to you. But you still have to ask the right question, and the answer usually comes in the morning, in those like waking minutes when you're like already awake, and you remember to ask that question, and then there is an aha moment, and it's step by step, little by little. You don't get all the answers. You get like, hey, protons are important. Hey, the mind is working through DNA with the speed of light. That was like, every moment was like, you already kind of know the answer, but you need to figure out that the mechanism how it happens. So the mechanism kind of crystallizes more and more. But very often we get like there is like another realization which turns the whole picture upside down, and you have to rethink everything from scratch. Like the last aha moment was like yesterday in the morning. It was we were thinking about those resonators, these hiders, as individual just a sec. Individual DNA pieces, and then we got some data and realized that no, it's not just DNA. It's DNA wrapped in protein. It's the whole structure. So it's not a smartphone which is naked. It is a smartphone which is boxed and supported by protein. So now we are coming back to the chemistry, thinking that it should be surrounded. The hiders that should have like protein structure around them, which is a very new way of thinking for us.
Perfect.
We were thinking so focusing on the DNA that we forgot about everything else. Now we have to like reconnect the DNA to the proteins.
I understand. Alex has a question. Go ahead, Alex.
Yes, I'm okay now.
Yeah, good.
Okay. First of all, I want to share something with you, Max. I understand your burner, like frustration and all that, but I'm thinking is something very positive. You collect information like a CEO on the internet from what uh, others doing by research, and you come up with something that they don't come up or seeing. So that is beautiful, and you have a lot of time with your family and enjoying being a father and grandfather. That's beautiful. Well, that is for me sharing this idea, and I want you to share. I know you share with me sometimes um, something about the incense and like natural. How do I say food? But mainly you use some incense, Egyptian or something like that, which is very very good for spirit and meditation. That's it.
Got it. Thanks. So yeah, how does the spiritual work plug into that? It plugs into the science in many ways, and I came out only recently. I combined my metaphysical activity with science activity openly, so I'm now not hiding it much. Not hiding it much. I don't advertise it much, but I don't hide it. So where does the world go with that? It's a very weird question. So apparently the world changed a lot in with a new bug, and apparently there is the world government, which like provisional world government, that wants to take control over the planet. And apparently they want to control the minds of the people, and they make steps to, or already a lot of steps to brainwash people and control the people. So the technologies are being developed for mind control, and what do we do about that? So the first question is like the personal choice. Which sides do we take, right? And naturally, we want to take the side of the resistance, right? We want to keep our old world, but I'm trying scientifically and practically to be detached. So I'm thinking. So that's again my contribution. I think it's my contribution to the understanding is that to realize that we are moving in a direction where it's very much like Soviet Union crashing and then being reconstructed from scratch. So I think we have the same crisis, just global right now, and the system is about to crash, and there will be a lot of totalitarian global influences like global currency, global mind control, global propaganda, and so on. And there will be that world government coming, which will bring the unity, but also bring the totalitarian regime where everybody has to follow the rules. So on one hand, I feel that's like the end of the world, and it is the end of the old world, but it is still a lot of opportunities, and it feels like an exciting game. So the Matrix offered us, after several years of stagnation and crisis, we finally get into an exciting time where I think we can make a huge impact. So my main point is that not taking sides is great, and accepting that terrible transformation as it is an option, which I would say. Not taking sides and just kind of flowing through that while connecting to light workers, essentially. So light workers don't have to create a party and create a revolution and try to resist. They don't have to. I mean, they can, but they don't have to resist that weird transformation of the humanity. But I think we would be very useful, at least our ideas will be very useful when we'll get on the other side. So I think what will happen some years from now, the system will crash, and there will be still partly crashed. I think they wanted to crash partly while keeping the control. So there'll be still certain forces having the control and providing the brainwash and unity and plugging everybody in the computer system. But then that system will crash again, because I don't think the totalitarian regime would be able to survive on the planet. Just this planet, this society is not conducive. It's called conducive. It's not supporting the totalitarian regimes. It was like a time in Soviet Union, Germany, and America where the system was, and even England, very, very rigid. And there was Stalin in Russia, was Hitler in Germany, where the system was very, very totalitarian. But then it goes through its own crisis and falls apart, because totalitarian regime cannot hold for a long time. The humanity evolves in a way that it will be much more distributed. And what would be the positive development is that the humanity moves to the Uber model. Uber, the car, taxi. How do you call it? When everybody is his own boss and can plug into the system and do freelance taxi work. And nowadays there is a lot of other freelance. So I think the world is moving to a freelance state where everybody can be independent. So on one hand we'll have brainwashing and totalitarian control. On the other hand we have the Uber model of the whole society, where everybody goes into the becomes independent contractor or freelancer. I think Karen disappeared, right? I need someone.
No, I'm right here. Here. I was just listening. I was letting you finish your thought. So.
Yeah, I need somebody to bounce that around.
Well, I mean, the question is that what do we do with that information now? If we know that we believe that the world is going this way, how are we to maintain our sovereignty as a human being based on the research that you're doing?
Thank you. Yeah, that's what so I like. Okay, based on my research, I think that and based on my research into the aliens. Okay, let's start from research on the aliens. So the aliens say that their way of ascension is through telepathy. For the third-dimensional civilization to ascend, they need to learn telepathy. And I'm pretty sure that humans, I know for sure that humans can learn telepathy. The humans that were taken to the alien worlds, they were very easy telepathic. So when you're among aliens, you don't need technology to become telepathic, you just learn it. So it's possible. So basically the vibration raises to a certain level. If you are present in a high vibrational place, you're telepathic, which is cool. And our children are born telepathic. Many of them are born telepathic, so they don't want to learn the vocal language because they expect to be able to speak telepathically. So those who kind of are natural telepath, they don't need to speak. They want to speak. They can speak naturally. Now, my technology implies that once we learn the language of DNA, we should be able to create helmets or some other devices which would be able to speak to the brain on its own DNA language. I think that's a major point. The brain language is the language of DNA. So when you plug into the language in DNA, you can create an interface between a technology and a brain which would speak the language of the brain. So right now we speak very slowly, but when we get DNA language, it will be a broadband communication with a lot of information going through. And then when two people are connected through those helmets, they can link like Star Trek mind meld, where they become one, essentially. Like in mind meld, they put their hands on the person, and they link into one mind. So I experience that when I do Reiki, I place my hands on the head of the person, and I can link to them. I do mind meld, and this way I do my healing. So in mind meld, it's much harder to lie. It's much harder to deceive. So the groups which are linked together into the working groups, they would be able to communicate on a higher level without deception. And I think that's the way to develop natural. It's called synthetic telepathy, when you have technology when people can talk to each other through helmets. But now what I'm saying is, through DNA technology, through DNA resonance technology, you should be able to connect on a much deeper level, and then possibly after taking off the helmets you will keep the connection. It's very much like in quantum chemistry. It's called entanglement, when two electrons touch each other, they become entangled, and then when they separate, every one of them, each of them carries the entangled state. They are linked forever. So humans which get entangled through the telepathy, they already entangled. Even they separate physically, they are still linked. So I think that's one of the possible scenarios how we become entangled, and then we become a telepathic unity, and then we ascend through, it's called singularity, basically, when there is much higher connectedness between people. We create a society of connectedness, and then we ascend. And they say that ascension will take about couple hundred years. Will happen in about couple hundred years. So it's hard to pronounce because it's way far ahead. So we are way far ahead. But I think what is happening now is the beginning. It's the start of that. So they say that the planet where we ascend already exists. It's called Terraha, and we are moving there. And many of us would be moving there through reincarnation. So we'll die here, we'll be born there. But some people might, just ascend with a living body, just transcend there. So what I'm thinking is that although the plan of the future world government is pretty evil to depopulate the planet, maybe their efforts on uniting people in the mind control maybe might be beneficial in a way that the technology will be developed and the system will be developed for people to connect to each other electronically or technologically. And also, one of the unexpected effects of the crisis which we have now on the people is that it happened at once and it hit everybody. Mm-hmm. We didn't have such a big global event ever. Never. And I noticed that in Russia such an event was, for example, Chernobyl, or another event was the crash of the Soviet Union, and in America 9/11 and Pearl Harbor. In Russia, obviously, that was like the beginning of the war, and I'm blanking by some reason, but there was an event which everybody is referring to. Where have you been at that certain moment? And I'm just blanking. I don't remember what was that in Russia, but I remember that where I was in 9/11, right? So that kind of shock synchronizes the population, and now the whole planet is synchronized with that shock which we had in March. So I think maybe one of the positive things is that the whole civilization becomes more united through that. So part of that global future government, agenda is actually positive in uniting the population. So obviously I don't want people to suffer. I want everybody to be living happily, children being fed and educated, right? And right now we have the crisis with everything, right? So my point is, for the personal message, is relax into the situation and see where you can be useful. I don't think it's all predefined. To me, like, if you look at the whole situation, I don't think anybody knows the plan. Even the plan of the future government, I don't think it's fixed. I think they play by ear, and they don't have the full plan. It's an experiment which never was under control, and now it is exceptionally out of control. On the other hand, I think there are certain focal points which are predefined. So there is a period of turbulence and disturbance when things go unpredictably, but there is sort of divine design of the matrix and time in such a way that there is a period of uncertainty which then will collapse into certainty. Certain points in the future are predefined, and all these random events somehow magically lead to this event. So the bigger path, I think, is defined. We are going forward. We are going to survive. We are going to ascend. But how we do that is not defined. So all this period of uncertainty is undefined, and you have to play by ear. And okay, there are three types of tribes. One tribe is tribe of Brahma, which is people who are helping to create stuff. There is a tribe of Vishnu, people who help preserve stuff. And there is a tribe of Shiva, which is people who feel really good about destroying stuff. And obviously now we have the dance of Shiva, where a lot of things are destroyed or are about to be destroyed, and actually the real destruction will come later. So in that time, I'm certainly from the tribe of Brahma. I really love creating. That's what drives me. Like, if I can start something, I'm happy, but finishing something is impossible, and keeping something going is really hard for me. So I have to bring other people to help me actually. Like, I co-created Hucolo, but then other people actually carry it forward, and the same thing with all the other projects. So what I'm saying is, I feel really excited about possibilities of creation which now are becoming available, because during the stagnation period, during the crisis period, there was nothing to create because everything was locked into the crisis. Now when the crisis becomes resolved, there is a lot of opportunities to create. So I welcome those who are from my tribe to feel the opportunity and catch the opportunity to create. For those who are from the Vishnu tribe, who are preservers, preserve yourself, preserve your values, keep that. I mean, we'll go through the hard period, and then there will be an opportunity for that to be actually used. So try to preserve what is worth preserving, but you cannot hold the system. I think the system it's out of our control. We cannot really be upset that the system will crash. Don't worry about something which is out of your control. Worry about something that you can do. Don't worry about something you can't do.
Right.
And I advise against taking sides. I don't see any sides except light workers, which you actually can take. There is like those groups. Every group, even the good ones, there is something about. I don't know. I don't see at the moment. There might be some groups which will be okay. All the traditional groups are rotten, but there will be new groups which you can design, you can create, especially the local ones, especially the ones like Hucolo, where you find people aligned with you. Yeah. Find the groups which really suit you, and find the groups where people are attracted to you. We can feel that it's possible, but this wouldn't be the big rotten parties or whatever. It would be like more like grassroots groups. And for Shiva, yeah, that's your time, guys. From the Shiva tribe, I just see you dancing. That's, I bless you. A lot of things have to be like washed away. There is a lot of rotten stuff which needs to be washed away.
So we're coming up to the end of the hour, Max. So I just want to, or to the end of the 2 hours. So what I would say, I liked your talk about the 3 Godheads and who each person is a tribe of. And I appreciate your recommendations on how to exist within that and be true to your nature. What would you give as a recommendation for everyone, say, in their meditation and intention setting to, basically, if your theory is correct, and how would you utilize now, without the use of electronics, but maybe through meditation, the use of the DNA resonance to, say, speak to the greater humanity's DNA? Because we know that not only does each individual have a DNA, but we know, or I believe, that each system has a DNA and structure, each country has a DNA and structure. How would you use that to amplify, say, peace in the world, well-being in the world, facilitating everything? And if what you say is the actual awakening is not for several hundred years, I think people are under the impression that they're going to awaken tomorrow, but the true awakening of humanity is still quite a ways off. But what can you do, and what can we do as, the forerunners of this total awakening? How can we utilize the information you've given us so that we can, on some level, employ that as a tool as opposed to just something that we know about?
Right. You said that awakening is not. I think awakening is happening right now pretty well.
You talk about humanity's awakening was several hundred years away.
Ascension, like dimensional ascension.
Sorry.
Yeah. Awakening happens like almost every day nowadays. It's like the time of awakening is now. Ascension, like going to another planet, to a green Terracha, I think that's not happening for everybody in this lifetime. At least that's the message from. We were expecting in 2012 just to wake up in a new planet, but it didn't happen. So now I'm a little bit skeptical. And when they say 200 years, it sounds about right. I get it from many sources, not only through Jim. Now, the contact, I think, is still possible. I don't know when, but I still hope that in my lifetime we'll have the open contact with the aliens, and at least the humanity will be awakened to the aliens, which will be great. Now, in terms of what do you do with DNA resonance, that story that Master, what did you do before enlightenment? I was carrying water and chopping the wood. And what started you do after enlightenment? I keep carrying water and chopping the wood. So there is nothing actually to do. It's all the same stuff, except you can really pay attention to the image of DNA, right? To the image of the genome. It's two serpents wrapped around each other. So two serpents become a symbol. And that's a symbol of health and a lot of other things. So two serpents, spiral helical serpents. I guess the main message is actually the mind control and brain-computer interface. I didn't mention, but that's what is openly funded by a lot of agencies. They didn't fund anything about the biological resonances, but when it comes to brain-computer interface, there is a lot of funding. So it's coming. The main message, it is coming. People plugged into the computers in many ways, including nanotechnologies. So they would be like, you've been injected, and then you can, you get voices in the head, and you're brainwashed, and they can control you through internet. So that's coming. So relax into that. It's it's not the end of the world. It's how you live with that. In yesterday's session with Jim, I asked about that with a painting from Georg Fitnier, and he said, ask us and we'll clean it out. So my choice was very simple, very practical. Align yourself with Georg Fitnier, and they will take care of you. And align yourself with angels; they will take care of you. Even in that weird world of technological brainwashing, you can survive. And the higher you are in your spirit, the less fear you have, the better you are going through that. Like you get a voice in your head, but you can say shut up and keep doing your work. It's the panic, it's the fear which is a lot. I just see that some people are in permanent fear for 4 months or 5 months now, and it's almost 5 months out of life. It's too big. You don't have to be in panic and deadly fear for that long. Fear is helpful for a little bit, but then you have to lift yourself up and enjoy the ride. That's it's all an illusion. And now we went into the most interesting part of the life. It's a game where you got a really nice ride and really nice roller coaster, and also imprisonment, and now everybody is under home arrest, which is you never have you ever thought what would you do if you were in prison? Now you are. So there is a lot of new opportunities for awakening, and a lot of new opportunities for individual work and collective work. So one of my blessings is I bless you to actually talk to people, touch people. It's very therapeutic for you and very therapeutic for them, and you really need it for your spiritual advancement. You need to be touched.
Yeah.
So find people who are... The virus is real. So find people who are not likely to be infected and talk to them, hug them, touch them, and create your own community of whoever. Part of my secret how I actually move through life is that I have Jim, and if something happens, I get in real trouble psychologically or on a life path, I get a session with Jim, and he brings the angels and they sort of help me, or the aliens, and Jim by himself can change the reality. He shifts the reality in a way it becomes better. And I have several more magicians of high level who do the same. They, I call them, I call friends, and I get help from everybody, and that allows me to move through and take a lot of stress and do pretty big steps while remaining in this physical body. Okay.
So connection to other
yes
people.
Yes, I recommend people, don't try to do it yourself. You need others. You are designed to be there are 12 copies of you. 12 Your soul is divided into 12 parts. You're just 1/12. You need another 11 tribes to help you going, because you're incomplete, so you need others. That's part of this matrix experience, that you cannot really make it by your own. You need others.
Well, thank you for that. Do you have some water?
Or I think we are still about to end, so it doesn't matter.
We've got about 2 minutes. Well, we're actually over time. So I just wanted to ask you, do you want to do a blessing? And if I think Kathy will probably want to do a blessing. Don will.
I can do my chanting. Do I want to start or finish? Whatever.
You can start. You can finish. Go ahead, Kathy.
All right.
You'd like a blessing now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Taroro lanare adoro adane, lala purusha, sinara manuvi paho, kashe noro satoro mano, ashuro ariashu, lakane pusha antare caro, maruva la senoro, Hasuru atashi fojimaru alor maru. Tatarusha tore mare. Lare aroja takari arusha. Kari taruku. Hashari toro matoro ariosha. Pakari iliosha ari uratara o tashadi urwisha. Mojimaru ashinala ulono alashe. Sakara moshi akura meru le casa purushi. Namaste.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dawn.
Karoshneneska törshna rock randiska gra. Hiaturma katiata kisk ora tichka. Pararandoski indura. Tranda indura. Trata. Trokka mastake tutusuka. Tratandisi. Or antiska aulu kuturu. Tiantuksko. Yandasi. Yatuku. Namaste.
Thank you. And Max.
You're muted? You're still muted?
There. Thank you so much. Sorry, I muted myself. Thank you very much for that sound bath healing there for us. And thank you for spending time with us. We'd like to have you back to channel. People are always requesting Paramahansa, so they missed that. Channel.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. And next week, everyone, not Max, Jim will be back. So we'll see you at the next time, same bat channel. And again, much love to you, everyone. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Much love to you.